the result of Jamaican the Jamaican election, in which the referendum related to continuing with the Federation. And hearing the sentiments of whether it was disappointment or influence as to why it didn't succeed. Who knows the real reason, but the point is that Federation did not work. Famously, Eric Williams, who was cited by the Speaker on behalf of government, gave the famous speech in which he said, and we all know it, 1 from 10 leaves 0. Context being that Trinidad and Jamaica were the economic powerhouses at the time, and Jamaica, as a result of their referendum, which of course begs the question of voice of the people being the voice of God, Jamaica, as a result of their referendum, said no to the Federation, continuing. Trinidad says we're not bearing that burden, and we all went our separate ways, save for the OECS. In doing my approach to the speech, though, I thought it interesting to look back a bit, similar to what Senator Cummings did, but more to anchor it on a statement made by Prime Minister Eric Williams in 1948, in which he lamented the risk that a fragmented West Indies would invite exploitation. Now, the question is whether those were prophetic words. We find ourselves in 2025 with individual CARICOM states being put in positions where they're being asked to do certain things. And these requests, depending on your political or philosophical bent, can be quite burdensome. And perhaps if you had the ability to say, well, let me take it to CARICOM, you might have some level of protection. For my part, I was warmly embraced when I left Barbados to go to Trinidad, and I was warmly re-embraced when I left Trinidad to come back to Barbados. I think a fact that we can all relate to is that we as CARICOM people, we already move. We move between islands through relationships, through culture. We move through love. We move for opportunity. Sometimes we move just to get away. But we have always moved within this region. I'm sure between Senator Morris and our Senator Reverend, we will hear the historic arguments that we all come from the same place as such, just different stops along the way, so we're necessarily reconnected. The question is, though, while we recognize that there's always been this movement of CARICOM nationals, we do recognize that there has always been this difficulty from the political level with regard to the implementation of the necessary structures to facilitate the movement. So there are certain benefits that are always touted. In other words, what is the point of all this? Why are we doing this? What is the benefit for the individual Barbadian citizen? The economists and the social engineers argue that the benefits of this movement are that you will have an increase in labor. We have heard in Barbados that there's a shortage of labor available for the various projects that exist. We have seen labeled titans of industry indicate the need that they have to go overseas to fulfill their labor quota. Is this what is being proposed to help with that? Supposedly, these type of things lead to an increase in cross-border investment. Cross-border investment therefore leads to economic growth. Is this something that would increase cross-border investment? They say that integration leads to an increase in access to markets. We've had access to markets in CARICOM. But you also see that certain CARICOM territories benefit more from the open borders than others. The big boys with the big engines, Jamaica and Trinidad. Jamaica actually complains about the amount of stuff that Trinidad puts on its markets. There's supposedly a reduction in the cost for going to market for different elements of reinsurance and protection as the CARICOM nations. We saw some benefits, I think, during the public health crisis of COVID, but I think we all do recall that there was a period where, despite CARICOM, there was every man for himself. So we must be pragmatic. And finally, the concept of this regional integration is that it allows us international leverage. And I dare say international leverage, as I indicated earlier, would be something that will benefit member states in 2025. We have seen the benefits, sir, in terms of the much lauded University of the West Indies. I'm sure many of us in here are products of that institution. We have seen the benefits of the CCJ in terms of decisions which guide the interaction of the states between each other, individual rights, even when governments, when it suits their purposes, may seek to foo-foo, is that the correct term? The institution. And we have seen the benefits in terms of international or regional trade and negotiations. Now, while there are benefits, there's always going to be risk. There's always going to be downsides to this integration movement. Certain islands, as I indicated before, have competitive advantages. Trinidad, Jamaica, and Guyana is now becoming the economic powerhouse of the region. What is going to be the impact on local businesses as a result of this? Can they compete with their more robust colleagues from other territories? When local businesses are forced to bring their tariffs in line with the regional bloc, what happens to the cost of living for persons who live in those islands? Trinidadians are now complaining about the price of gas going up, and if we had to pay the price of gas in Barbados that Trinidadians had to pay, we would be walking up. If we do a regional approach to tariff on these things, it will cause an increase in cost. Higher tariffs means the cost of goods go up. That means the cost of living goes up. So when we talk about regionalism, when we talk about integration, we need to recognize that there are risks. And then, as said somewhat, perhaps a bit more heatedly by the member who represents the opposition as such, sir, there is a strain on national resources as a result of regional integration. This is a fact. This is a stated fact. The resources which will be impacted are healthcare, more persons, regional movement. We have seen in instances where leaders of other territories have had to come to Barbados because of the quality of the healthcare. That's a fact. That's not someone seeking to be alarmist. It is a fact. There is going to be an impact on the educational resources. We have seen in the news, we see it every school term, we have seen it this term, the issue with regard to the current educational system, with regard to the schools. These are facts. These things, healthcare, education, are impacted by regional movement. The question of housing, rents increase, supply and demand. That's a fact. It was stated recently that there has been a huge uptake in the rental costs. Some attribute it to the welcome stamp, some attribute it to a variety of things, but the point is the cost of living goes up, the cost of housing goes up, you have more people competing for a limited resource. So there will be positives and there will be negatives. So Barbados, once again leading as it did with the original Treaty of CARICOM, is saying, let's go. Barbados now is joined by Belize, Dominica, and St. Vincent. So the question is, what price? What price will be paid for taking these steps? And I have no problem with the concept of Barbados punching above its weight. I have no problem with Barbados leading. I have no problem with the statements as if this is who we are. But sometimes I always tell my people who I work with that perhaps it's not about being first, but it's about doing it correctly. And it's how do we balance this? How do we do these things in a manner which we are cognizant of the cause and effect? So the fact that it's said in a political setting that there are risks and there are dangers, that is somewhat an alarmist tone. It's a reality. It is a reality, and it's a determined and stated cause and effect of integration. One of the other issues that I am concerned about, sir, is the question of crime. And let me at the outset say, I am not saying that regional integration would lead to an increase in crime. So that's not what I'm saying. Let me repeat it. I am not saying that regional integration leads to an increase in crime. I am saying that it was stated that local gangs are affiliated with regional criminal groups. The sixes, it was stated to be, and the sevens. Somehow these numbers are very popular. If the criminal elements already have the integration, already have the linkages, already have the movement, what about the resources to put these things down? Right now, we have regional security training, we have the RSS, we have IMPACTS, we have Interpol, and a variety of agencies. But what we do not have is the local implementation of the Arrest Warrant Treaty, which allows policemen to go from jurisdiction A to jurisdiction B to recover criminals. We still have to rely on extradition. The recent case of Brent Thomas, where Trinidadian police came to Barbados, Barbadian police were involved in the removal of the gentleman, resulted in a litany of statements with regard to the correct procedure as to be utilized. But the point is, if the criminals are moving and the movement is being facilitated by these borders being opened, we need to ensure that the police can go after them with the same alacrity, that they be given the resources similar to what the FBI has, where they move, because we saw how that originated. The FBI had to get specific powers to move from state A to state B when they were pursuing criminals, because criminals were going across borders and doing as they like. We have a situation now where criminals move with impunity throughout our region. Sometimes they're intercepted, sometimes they're cautioned, sometimes they're stopped, sometimes quote-unquote concerts don't happen. But there's still the movement. And while the police can share the information, the ability to come after these persons, to stop them in their tracks as if they're where the regional support needs to be strengthened, and the police being given our agency be established that allows us to go after those who will bring harm under the guise of regional integration. So I therefore believe, sir, that we need to recognize that the concerns expressed are valid. They may not be politically expedient, because I don't think any political party gets by saying, that's a good point. That's a good point. That's not how politics works. As someone says, no opposition ever succeeded by saying the government is doing a good job here. That's not how it works, I understand. But we are seeing, as indicated by the previous speaker, as I said, somewhat differently, there is a reaction to this immigration issue. There's a rise in nationalism throughout the world, and the scapegoats are always the migrants. The recent statement by the Prime Minister of Japan speaks for itself. A whole ministry has been established to deal with the quote-unquote migrants. Everybody just put your country and put the word first after it. That is where the world is. That is the reality of where we stand in 2025. So you're going to get a reaction whenever you speak about integration and movement and people and migrants, a response of protectionism and a populist narrative. You're taking away jobs from people. You are going to cause suffering. We have limited resources. Why are you doing this now? The refrain was, and I really should check the source. I'm sure we've heard it. So let's put this on the table of anecdotal, or I heard. Because you know, in Barbados, nobody knows, but everybody hears. So I heard, sir, that when they had the debate about the federation, that in Jamaica, the statement that was made was that if you had two goats, the Trinidadians coming for one to curry. Now, think of the impact and think of whether we have evolved as a Caribbean people for such a statement to fall flat in 2025. It won't. If people are concerned about their individual welfare, the concept of sharing limited resources leads to a reaction. So that's a reality. So the government finds its position of having to deal with that. It has the obligation, and I keep on saying, you can't get vexed if people say, why are you doing it? What is in it? And repeat the messaging. The government is excellent at messaging when it's ready. Excellent at messaging. So the heat or the concerns, continue to address them. Continue to educate people. Continue to let persons know why we are doing this and why whatever perceived harmful benefits they are will be mitigated. That's the fact. That's the obligation. For my part, I have no choice but to support. I cannot, as a child of CARICOM, come in here and say no to this. But at the same time, while supporting it, I can recognize the concerns of persons who are saying, will it hurt me? Will it impact me? And there is a price to be paid for leadership. I think we all pay it in one way or another. I think the government needs to be cognizant and to see as far as practicable, how can we protect individuals from these stated concerns, real or imagined. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Kevin.
Mr. President, colleagues.
Senator Morris.
Sorry. Mr. President, colleagues, I rise to give my support to this bill that is before us because I believe that freedom of movement is integral to Caribbean territories, especially CARICOM. It is necessary for regional integration. It is necessary for Caribbean economic development. It is necessary for social cohesion. Sir, it is necessary for any region where there are states coming together to form a union. And so this issue of freedom of new movement is not new. It is not a new issue, sir. What is new is that we are introducing it here, but it's not new. I want to posit this afternoon, this afternoon. The issue in the Caribbean has never been Caribbean integration. Every leader throughout the years, every leader has supported Caribbean integration. The issue, sir, is freedom of movement. That caused the demise. In fact, that was one of the reasons that caused the demise of the West Indies Federation, along with some insularity. But sir, I intend to take an historical approach to this, even if I as long as I have time too, I will go into a theological discourse. But let us go back, sir. Let's go back. I'm going to go back as far as 1876. Remember that Jamaica and Barbados, and I think St. Vincent, Vox Populi, around the same time, all flared up into rebellion because the British government wanted to solve the social, economic, and political problems in these countries. And the British government wanted one of the moves was to introduce freedom of movement. We know what happened in Jamaica, sir, with Governor Ayre, he led Jamaica into a situation where there would be killing. The Jamaica Assembly panicked and succumbed to Crown Colony government. In Barbados, sir, we had the same issue when there was proposed the Confederation of Barbados with the Windward Islands. Again, sir, the issue was freedom of movement. As a matter of fact, when John Pope Hennessy came, John Pope Hennessy said that one of his 6-point plans was movement between the prisoners, sir, and movement in the Caribbean with prisoners. The Moyne Commission recommended movement, freedom of movement between Caribbean territories. As a matter of fact, sir, when they look at the population of Barbados then, the Moyne Commission even recommended that Barbados be allowed to go to St. Vincent, and they had an estate at Vieux Fort so that the Barbados could go there. I'm going to stop there to say this, sir. That I heard the leader of the leader of government business, sir, say that somebody said that if we do not either federate or perish. That was said by Edward Carrington in 2006, but long before that, Norman Manley had said it, federate or perish. In fact, he said that if we fail to federate, we are purblind, and we will be condemned at the bars of history. That's what he said. And this continued, sir, because we're going to spend some time on Barbados. This continued, sir, with the 1958 to 62 Federation, which, as we all know, failed. And if you look at the reasons for its failure, sir, I think Sir John Mordecai, he was the one who was advertising and pushing for freedom of movement. The issue was never federation. Every Caribbean leader wanted federation. The issue is freedom of movement, and that's what we're discussing here today. Barbados' independence, sir, I've always made the point. Even in my view, I'm not saying, but my view is that it was hastily conceived. But let us go and see what happened at Barbados' independence. We have all said that the Right Excellent Arabar, sir, was a regionalist. But what does the evidence say? That when he moved for independence, sir, when he wanted independence for Barbados, he wanted to go alone. And the books will tell you that he wanted to go alone for the same reason that Eric Williams and Manley, the same reasons that Manley and Eric Williams did not want the Federation because, sir, of freedom of movement. And how do we know this, sir? Yes, he came, Right Excellent Arabar at the time came with independence, but he wanted to go it alone. And he was objected to Winter Crawford and Erskine Ward. Erskine Ward was the Minister of Portfolio. Winter Crawford was the Deputy Prime Minister. Winter Crawford was responsible for industrialization in this country. And he knew that if we were to have successful industrialization, then we needed people. So he supported independence within the Federation of the Little Eight. It was the same thing, sir. When you check the history, the only leader that did not object to freedom of movement was Grantley Adams, sir. All the others wanted independence, but no freedom of movement. They cannot have the two. Sir, what happened, sir, is that Arrow decided that he was going to go independence alone. He rejected the moves by Winter Crawford and Erskine Ward, and both of them resigned from the cabinet. So when we get in here and talk, or go outside and talk, bear these things in mind, that both Winter Crawford and Erskine Ward resigned from the cabinet, sir. I think that these fellows decided we're going to side with Grantley Adams, but they knew Grantley Adams had a point. And as a result of that, sir, some sordid debates followed after. Because Grantley Adams, and this is something that people ought to know, because I hear politicians people talk about politicians, but when you remain, sir, and your evening years, people begin to pillory you. The debate, sir, and you can check. Let me give you the information. Better check first, sir. I think it is Hansard, the official Gazette. Give me a minute, sir. 1966, 67, the period from 1966 to 71. Grantley Adams was pilloried in the House of Assembly. Can you imagine the Prime Minister saying to him then that he, because of what he was saying, said to him, "Know your place, old man, know your place." Because Grantley Adams wanted independence within the Federation of the Little Eight. Joy Edwards got up and he said, I can tear holes in his backside. So that's the thing, not me. I can tear holes in his backside. Only because of that. They never forgave Grantley Adams. And furthermore, sir, if I may go a little further, what do we have? I'm not reading. I'm reading. No. It's a pen. But I'm saying to you, I did the check, sir. I did the check, sir. I checked Hansard, and I realized that is what was said, because there were quotations, sir. And Grantley Adams told him that the only mistake he had ever made was when he introduced the Honorable Prime Minister into politics, and he referred to him as a dictator, a tyrant, and some other words, sir. Those are Hansard. But let me go a little bit further, sir. This has not changed. I believe that the opposition, sir, right now, and I have to say, the opposition is consistent. They're consistent. They're talking about integration. The issue is not integration. The issue is freedom of movement. The Shanique Murray case has already been cited. And the opposition seems to forget the ever so welcome wait for call, where a number of Ghanaians also were rounded up and exported or deported from this country. And that treatment was no different from the way ICE in the United States is treating some of those migrants. It's no different, sir. When you were, when you look at it. So it's okay for the opposition to come in here and pump us up about what should we do. It's not integration, sir. It is freedom of movement. They talk about the CCJ, that Barbados gone ahead and accepted the CCJ. What should we do, sir? Wait for somebody to do it. That's what we should do. Wait for somebody else to do it. So if we have to wait on persons, then we have to wait on some person in a sober moment, but say, until they reach the point where they will say that the Caribbean is a zone of peace and not an illusion. CCJ, sir, the thing that irks me with this is that all of us do law, no, not us, do law at the University of the West Indies. You go to school, you go to law school, Trinidad or Jamaica. If you do law in England, you still have to spend some time here in the Caribbean attending law school. In other words, we are talking about a Caribbean entity. But we do all our law here. You go up there, have to come and go to law school, but yet we cannot trust our jurists with an appeal as the final court of appeal. The problem is one of freedom of movement. So I grew up in Black Bess and Mangrove, St. Peter. I say that all the time because these are the people that make me feel and know that I belong, that I'm not fitting in. And I remember, sir, there where the quarry is, below there used to be a camp. And the Vincentians used to come to cut cane. Right. The Vincentians used to come and cut the canes here. But they integrated into the society. The problem with Europe, sir, is that Europe have people who come into country with different cultures, different values, different norms. We have almost the same historical background. We have almost the same values. And that is why I said to you, sir, that we cannot wait for Jamaica and for Trinidad to approve freedom of movement. So this is the problem over the years. You know that this problem was also in the United States. If you read the papers, the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist papers, that the Southern states felt that they would have lost everything, that the North would come and take over. And they solved that problem. The issue is that at the abolition of slavery, when slavery was abolished, or announced, the abolition of slavery was announced, a lot of these former slaves then ran to the North only to meet racism. But it seems as though that the only freedom of movement the opposition wants to tolerate is if the persons are going to run for them in their election, or if they're going to walk up and down this country marching and protesting. Sir, somebody mentioned the time for action. I come here, sir, with all my evidence, sir. In this book here, Time for Action, the logic of freedom of movement for all categories of West Indian professionals, skilled personnel, and workers generally, and entrepreneurs, including higglers and hucksters, will have to be permitted to work itself through the system.
Just to maintain proper form.
This is the Time for Action, sir, which is...
No, just to say though.
The report, sir, of the West Indian Commission.
But you haven't heard what he said.
But I'm prepared to make a document.
No, that's fine. But You said somebody mentioned a time for action. I believe it was an honorable member
Sir,
that mentioned a time for action, not somebody.
sir,
So just keep the
My
titles
apologies.
official.
My apologies. Sir, how do I know? That's the Morning Commission report, sir. And we are really prepared. I'm looking for the other one. Sir,
I think you brought your whole library, Senator Morris. That's very good. We'll get to be elected.
sir, I know how it's a thought sometimes without evidence. Sir, I said that the issue is one of movement. Let us look, sir, at Article 46, the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas, which I know is already a document of this House. Every point, sir, is one about movement. Movement for university graduates, media workers, sports persons, artists, and musicians. Member states shall establish appropriate legislative and administrative procedure to arrange to facilitate the movement of skills. Provide for a movement of community nationals. The elimination of the requirements for passports for community nationals. Every point, sir, deals with movement. And that is why I say that the issue is one of freedom of movement. All the leaders, sir, wanted integration, but they didn't want freedom of movement. And the last person I want to refer to, sir, which I believe is also a document, in fact, it is a document of this House, is our former Prime Minister, Owen Arthur. And to quote his words, sir, this can be accomplished, secondly, the CSME must be made to be a positive and indispensable factor in the daily lives of the ordinary man and woman to confer upon it credibility and immediate relevance. This can be accomplished by extending and quickly implementing the provisions for the free movement of skills beyond the existing list of graduates, self-employed, and the technical and managerial class to the other wage-earning and artisan groups in the Caribbean. But this last paragraph is most interesting, sir. A Guyanese carpenter should not be made to feel that he can build the cupboards at the residence of the Prime Minister of Barbados without it being regarded as an odious and criminal act. I'm sure persons can remember that. And all I'm saying, sir, this is what this legislation is about. Freedom of movement. Freedom of movement. And why is it necessary, sir? Because our population is experiencing negative growth. Some people say it declines, is in decline. But that's the term the sociologists use. It's experiencing negative growth. Sir, some years ago, Robert Thomas Malthus posited a theory, which is now referred to as the Malthusian theory, because the population was going the other direction. It was increasing. As a matter of fact, he said it was increasing exponentially, while at the same time, food supply increased arithmetically. Right or wrong, sir? I'm not good at math, but I'm not good at that. And he believed that if it continued this, that the population growth would outpace food production, and he came up with a number of solutions, a number of positive checks and preventative checks. I won't go through all of that. But of course, Malthus's prediction was not realized because there was improvement in agricultural techniques and all of that. But our population is going in the other direction. There's no Malthus to talk about it, but there's some common sense things that we know that can affect our population when it is on the decline. One, it is going to be an aging population. So if you have fewer young people, it means that we are going to have more elderly citizens, increased demand for health care, pensions, elder care services, a shrinking workforce. We're going to have labor shortages, sir. Economic activity will slow down. You may have to rely more on immigration. But there is one point on this that I want to take note of, sir. And that is, I'm hearing that they're bringing people to take Barbadians' job. So you already feel that people are going to flock here en masse? I don't think so, sir. But what is more, going hand in hand with a declining population is also an unemployment rate of 6%. 6%, sir, is almost full employment. So it means one way or the other, we will need some persons. And that is what the opposition failed to realize. All these things and the people and the jobs that they talk about. Barbados is 6% unemployment rate. And therefore, you know that freedom of movement can solve that problem. So that I will not go through all of them, but there's something that I want to say. I will leave the others to talk about this. There's something I want to say. The Prime Minister, sir, said that she believes in this covenant of hope. Covenant of hope. And I believe in it too, sir, because I believe that our societies should be governed by covenant and not just by contract. And I pay homage, because this is where I get this information from, a Jewish rabbi called Jonathan Sachs. He wrote a number of books. I have all. But there were three in particular that we need to look at. One, how to heal a fractured world. Two, dignity and diversity. I think that's what it is. And three, the politics of hope. And he is saying, if we're going to have things like a society, it cannot be no us and them. It cannot be an I and he and he. It has to be we. Freedom of movement, sir, requires trust. Trust that our neighbors will welcome us, that our economies will benefit, and that our societies will grow stronger together. Not the doom and gloom that I've heard, sir. A covenant fosters this trust, and that is what we need in our Caribbean society, trust. If freedom of movement is to work, sir, we must have trust. Because when we embrace covenant politics, we move beyond suspicion. We move beyond competition. we begin to see migration not as a threat, but as an opportunity for cultural exchange, for economic dynamism, and for regional solidarity. Covenant politics, sir, gives us a shared responsibility. We assume responsibility for the whole, sir, not just me and my clique, but we assume responsibility for the whole, for everybody. And therefore, freedom of movement must be accompanied by shared commitments, commitments to education, commitments to healthcare, infrastructure, and employment. We must ensure that no state is left behind. It gives us regional identity because we have shared values. So a Vincentian teacher must feel safe to work in Barbados. An Antiguan priest, sir, must feel safe to work in Barbados. A Ghanese girl must feel safe to come to school in Barbados and grow up in Barbados. That is part of the identity. Sir, I would like to speak for 5 hours today.
Not today.
But I know you're going to tell me.
You have to wind up. Please.
You have to wind up.
Yes.
Sir, sir, as I've said from the very beginning, the issue here is not integration. The issue is freedom of movement. That is what I was called here to debate today. We cannot have successful integration unless we have freedom of movement. And sir, if we have this freedom of movement, I used to mark CHC, and I used to go to Jamaica, sir. I used to go to Jamaica. And you could not tell who was Jamaican, Barbadian, anybody, only in terms of accent. Yes, sir. One final point I was made by our representative for the opposition. Talking about CFC. We say up to now, I have a very strong relationship with CFC. And I know that every 10 years, the various syllabi are readjusted to suit circumstances in the Caribbean. Right now, I'm even involved in the amendment of the syllabus for Cape history. So I'm saying that do not let us frighten Caribbean people with these things. What we need to do, sir, is to look at this Caribbean as an entity. Look at it as an entity, all for one or one for all. I'm sure, I'm anticipating the speech by Sandra Rogers because I know he can give me a calypso on that. But I do not want us to miss the point, sir. The issue is not Caribbean integration. Everybody is for it. The issue is freedom of movement. With that, sir, I wish to thank you.
Thank you, Senator Reverend Morris. Senator Cummins.
Mr. President, I know that there are those who appear to be eager to speak, but I beg to move at this time the suspension of this sitting for lunch to reconvene at 3:10 in the afternoon.
The question is that this sitting be suspended until 3:10 p.m. today. Will those honorable senators in favor please say aye? Those against please say no. The things the ayes have it, this sitting is suspended until 3:10 p.m.